post-independence realities. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome our respected Vice Chancellor, Honorable Sir Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu, a noted political scientist and a celebrated essayist of our time, who will kindly inaugurate this webinar and will deliver the inaugural address. It is my privilege to bid the welcome to Professor Tapan Kumar De, Dean of Arts and Commerce, Vidyasagar University, who is the chair for this inaugural session. I will take this opportunity to heartily welcome the chief guest of this webinar, Sri Sudeep Ghosh, former IAS and former Director of State Archaeology and Museum, Government of West Bengal. It is my real pleasure to invite knowledgeable Professor Suchindranath Bhattacharya, former Professor of Museology, University of Calcutta, and President of West Bengal Museum Association, who is gracing this webinar as guest of honor. I will take this opportunity to welcome the invited speakers of today's webinar: Professor Vinita Damodaran, Director, Center for World Environmental History, University of Sussex, England; Professor A.S.M. Abu Dayan, Department of Bangla, Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh; Professor Indranil Acharya, Department of English, Vidyasagar University; and Manukang Shamacharan Hembram, Head, Department of Santali, Vidyasagar University. I most respectfully welcome Professor Deepak Kumar Midda and Dr. Sumita Sarkar, Chair and Co-Chair of the first academic session, and Professor Indranil Acharya and Dr. Ratan Hembram, who will chair and co-chair the second academic session. I feel delighted when I welcome the galaxy of audience present this morning in this webinar, my esteemed colleague, faculties, my beloved research scholar, students, who are the true strength behind all our endeavor. I also welcome Dr. Jayanta Kishore Nandi, Registrar, Vidyasagar University, to this webinar. It is a great pride for us to commemorate the 75 years of Indian independence on this occasion, which is also christened as Azadi Ki Amrut Mahotsav. Vidyasagar University is a proud partner to this memorable event and has been celebrating this occasion with year-long programs. Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum feels honored to join this celebration by organizing this international webinar. This center works with a mission to expand the opportunities for the backward classes of the people and Adivasis in particular by privileging their voices, visions, along with the study, documentation, and preservation of their rich cultural treasure. In pursuance of this great mission, this webinar themed on the exploration of the marginal world of the Adivasis, myriad worlds of the Adivasis in the pre- and post-independence periods would certainly contribute to our understanding, since it is going to unravel a memorable discourse from the historical, environmental, literary, and ethnographic perspectives. With this hope and expectation, I welcome each and everyone once again on behalf of Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum, Vidyasagar University, and wish you a rewarding intellectual journey that this international webinar is going to offer. Thank you very much. And with this, I would humbly invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu to kindly inaugurate this webinar and to deliver the inaugural address. And I also request Professor Tapan Kumar De to kindly chair this occasion and to kindly take the charge of this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Suman. But I think our Honorable Vice Chancellor has left the meeting just for technical causes. He will join, I hope, very soon. Can you call, Sir Mohan?
Yes, just a minute, sir. Okay, sir is joining. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor is joining. We have already.
Okay. Thank you.
I think due to some technical reasons, the connectivity went.
Sir has joined.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. এটা খুব অসুবিধা হয় এইখানে ইয়ে না থাকলে না এরপর থেকে যেটা মাউস আছে ওইটাই দেবে
বাবাই শোনো
কি মানে এটা এনেছো এমন একটা জিনিস জানি নমস্কার We'll be starting it, Professor Acharya.
Sir, please, sir, you have already invited.
Yes, sir, of course.
Speak, sir, please.
Oh, I have been invited already.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Professor Tapan Kumar De, the Dean of Arts and Commerce, Vidyasagar University. Professor Shumahan Bandyopadhyay, Director, Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum, Vidyasagar University. Sri Sudip Das, IAS Director of State Archaeology Museum, Government of West Bengal. Welcome you, sir. Professor S.N. Bhattacharya, President, Museum Association of West Bengal. And Dr. Nirmal Mahato, the organizing secretary. Professor Indranil Acharya of Adivasi Studies and Museum, and all the distinguished speakers from within Vidyasagar University and also from outside, my fellow colleagues associated with the CASM, and also from the other departments and institutions. and above all, my dear students, it is indeed appreciable that the CASM of our university is organizing a national seminar on many worlds of Adivasis, pre and post-independent, in commemoration of 75 years of Indian independence. Before today's webinar begins formally, allow me to spell out the reasons, significance, and courses of the year-long events that the university has undertaken to organize throughout the year to commemorate the birth, the 75 years of Indian independence, which also coincide with the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and 158th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. Friends, I think you will agree that the 75 years are long years for the history of an independent nation. It gives us sufficient time to ponder over, recollect, and re-evaluate our progress, achievements, and glories, and also the areas of shortcomings where there is ample scope for further progress, improvement. Our celebration committee, that is 75 years of Indian Independence Celebration Committee, has also taken the pledge to understand the meaning of the idea of India. I'm emphasizing the idea, the word idea of India in a very comprehensive manner. And to do this, we have to be not only aware of the last 75 years since independence, but also the times of the past which led us to the 15th August of 1947. And to my mind, the idea of India, of course, carries some of the great ideas of the ancient India, Indian civilization, and also some of the traditions and technologies of the medieval India. But what we are today, the shape and state of our dear country and nation of today cannot be understood if we do not count the contributions and heritage of the modern India, which has arrived after the coming of the British, with our after the coming of the British, and with our days of suffering under the colonial imperialism, which began with the Battle of Plassey and ended with the tragic story of partition. And Adivasis have an immense and glorious contribution to the making of this new India, which is seldom acknowledged, which is very seldom acknowledged. In fact, while others, especially the first generations of Indian native elites, were being swayed by the coming of the British and their culture, the Adivasis were the first to resist the colonizers for protecting the rights and culture which they had preserved since time immemorial. But their two-pronged resistance was interpreted as anti-modern, not only by the colonialists, but also by the non-Adivasi Indians. Although a radical educated section of Indians were vehemently anti-British since the 1880s, but they also could not support the Adivasi anti-colonial struggle, since for them the Adivasis were basically backward or anti-modern. Thus they were doubly distanced. The Adivasis were doubly distanced, and still they are, I think, by the colonizers and by their own countrymen, and therefore were truly the margin of the margins, or the subalterns, as you have described it, who did not have a voice. It's like to refer to a famous article by Gayatri Chakraborty, can that subaltern speak? And who did not have a voice which is comprehensible to the modern elite, whether white or brown. Even after independence, a majority of the elite think that the destruction of the pre-modern life of Adivasis is a fait accompli. It cannot be avoided to make them modern. But in today's world, the discourse of modernity and its inseparable link with the so-called development have led us, according to the environmentalists, to the brink of collapse. which pollutes the air and sound, which increases global warming every day. More than a century ago, Gandhiji, in his immortal book, very pamphlet-like book called Hind Swaraj, from another perspective, had rejected such a modern civilization. But the environmentalists and ecologists of today also prescribe that no one can save our planet if the humans do not learn to live with nature and curb all the needs and technologies that are antithetical to the idea of coexistence with nature. No other groups in India other than Adivasis have practiced this idea generations after generations without any elite theoretical baggage. Thus, rather than making the Adivasis so-called modern, now the time has come for the so-called moderns to go to the Adivasis and learn from them how to use sustainable indigenous knowledge and technologies of life, and how to combine the Adivasi mode of life with the urban modern life. I'm sure that all these issues will be discussed in today's national webinar. I hope the multitudes of Adivasi worlds will be explored, not only with cold academic elitism, but also with sensitivity and understanding. In the end, I wish the seminar, all the webinar, all the success. And with this, I announce that this webinar is open. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful inaugural speech. Rightly, you have pointed out the position of the Adivasis in Indian freedom movement as well as in the present time. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Sudip Ghosh, IAS, Director of State Archaeology and Museum, Government of West Bengal, to address the gathering as chief guest. Sir, please.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, audible, of course.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Honorable Chairman and Vice Chancellor, Professor Shivaji Pratim Bosu, Guest of Honor, Professor S.N. Bhattacharya, Professor Tapun Kumar De, Dean of Arts and Commerce of the University, Professor Sumohan Bandyopadhyay, Director, Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum, Dr. Nirmal Kumar Mahato, Organizing Secretary of the Webinar Committee, and other distinguished guests on the virtual dais and the elite audience. I am thankful to the Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum, Vidyasagar University, for getting an opportunity to this international seminar, webinar, where the illustrious speakers will address about the transformation of realities of varied worlds of Indian tribal over a pretty long period of time. During my tenure as Director of Archaeology and Museum Directorate, I came across a news that fossils of prehistoric human being of around 10,000 years old were found in Shijua, a small village on the bank of river Kongshabati under Lalgod police station. Besides, during archaeological exploration and excavation, lots of antiquities like stone tools, pieces of broken potteries of Neolithic and Chalcolithic period were found from many places of Jhargram district, namely Chilkigod, Hatibadi, Laljol, and so on. These prehistoric human beings may be the ancestors of today's Adivasi, the endemic people of the place. Concurrently, I have deep affinity and indomitable curiosity about the Adivasi because I have spent a considerable period of time during late 80s and early 90s in a tribal-dominated block, Binpur 1, with its headquarters at Lalgड़ as block development officer. Then I had closely watched the lifestyle of the Adivasis, especially Santalis. I have undertaken extensive tour by cycle even at the remotest corners of the block, sometimes to some isolated hamlet in the midst of dense forest to take the flavor of rich heritage and culture of the tribal people. I was fond of childlike simplicity of the Santali tribe, and perhaps that is why they were exploited across the centuries. Besides Santalis, there are also small hamlets of some primitive tribes, namely Lodha and Khedia. I had to interface with these tribes also. I have heard many stories about Lodhas. I have completed my tenure at Lalgड़ nearly 30 years back. But even in 2021, fond memory sometimes brings the light of those days. I can remember their fantastic skill in archery, their melodious music with rhythmic Pata dance, Lagre dance. I can even remember the big assembly of the Santali tribe on Hul Day each year. Then I had taken part in chorus while reciting Hul Day slogan. Hule hul, hapuch hupuch delangja. Hul means rebellions. Hule hul is the call of the rebellions. And hapuch hupuch delangja means gopone gopone agrosor ho. Proceed secretly. No, no more nostalgia. Let us return to the present. It is a holy venture to preserve the cultural heritage of such ethnic group. A good number of Adivasi museum and Adivasi research centers were set up at different sites or different cities across the country, such as Bhopal, Araku, Pune, Ranchi, Silvassa, Hyderabad, and such others. There is a small Adivashi museum in Jhargram also. I was extremely happy when I heard lately that here in Vidyasagar University, a museum fully dedicated to the tribal is maintained, because a university-owned Adivashi museum may be the rarest of rare. Their history and culture through text and photographs is required to be focused. Musical instruments used by the Adivasi, traditional weapons, Adivasi handicraft items, etc., may be unique pieces of antiquities for preservation. To make the museum more attractive, Adivasi lifestyle can be depicted also by using three-dimensional life-size models, which is called a diorama. An excellent way of showcasing something as we see in many modern museums. In case of space crunch, miniature models can also be used. In that case, a table space is enough for diorama. Already we are too late, but if these are not systematically conserved even today, such a unique cultural heritage will be as dead as dodo. Lot of thanks to the university authority and others associated with this museum. The Adivasi now, or the Adivasi knows the usage of varied indigenous medicinal plants which are not widely in use in Ayurvedic medicine. During my tenure at Science and Technology Department, a project about survey of indigenous medicinal plants was conducted in a few districts to search out unknown or little known herbal plants. But there are even more stones which are still yet to be unturned. The civilized people have lost their basic animal instincts in course of civilization. So they do not catch the signals of the nature even with sophisticated devices. But the Adivashi, especially Lodhas, because of their seamless amalgamation with the nature, can instantly understand nature's messages by their senses. That is the basic key to their survival in uncongenial condition. So there is ample scope of R&D about the behavior and culture of the Adivashi. Adivashi of India are the world's largest population of indigenous people. Sanjeev Kumar Chattopadhyay had rightly said, Bonnera bone sundar, Shishura matrikrore. The wilds are beautiful in the forest, just as the infants in mother's lap. Similarly, tribal and forests are inalienable part of each other. So Adivashi bear a disproportionately huge part of the impact of climate change and global warming. For the development of the tribal, lots of seminars and symposiums were organized. Million reams of papers were used and billion crores of rupees were spent. But desired goal is still a mirage. Obviously, in the last few decades, marked changes about the attitude towards the Adivashi are concerned, are noticed. In recent time, in West Bengal, massive development works are seen in the Adivashi concentrated area. Nowadays, more and more tribal people are coming closer to the mainstream civilized citizens. Adivashi children are coming to the educational arena more in number, and their literacy rate is increasing. This may be a fact for the Santali of West Bengal and a few other tribes, but it is far from reality for about all 705 scheduled tribes of India. We even do not know about the basic features of the lifestyle of a few tribes of Andaman and Nicobar Island, isn't it? Academically, I am not very sound about the Adivashi, but my experience says that development of tribal may be done without changing their environment, where they feel comfortable. This is a tough task, no doubt, but we may try to break the shackles by striding in that direction. Being exploited through centuries, some sort of inherent hatred has been grown up in their mind towards the civilized people. So far as development of tribal is concerned, our primary goal should be to make them realize that we are their friends and not enemies. And then we may start to uplift their living standard, introducing various poverty alleviation program. We cannot calculate their poverty by means of their per capita income only. Poverty is multidimensional that encompasses the various deprivations experienced by the tribal people in their daily life, such as poor health, lack of education, inadequate living standards, disempowerment, poor quality of work, and threat of violence, and living in areas that are environmentally hazardous, and many others. To eradicate their poverty, we should take into account each and every such parameter in sync. Before concluding, I again appreciate the University Authority as well as the Center for Adivasi Studies and Museum for setting up the Adivashi Museum. I hope one day it will become the face of the Paschim Medinipur district, if not West Bengal. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightened lecture with some flavor of your nostalgia. And when you are speaking about your nostalgic incidents, I thought that you were there at present also mentally. Thank you, sir. And you have rightly pointed out that to preserve the culture, rich culture, that is nature care culture, we have to change our attitude immediately. Otherwise, it will be too much late. And your lecture, uh, I can remind a lecture of a speech given by Rabindranath Tagore, written by, বড় ছোটর উপকার সহজেই করিতে পারে, কিন্তু ছোটর উপকার করিব বলিলেই উপকার করা যায় না, ছোটর উপকার করিতে হইলে ছোট হইতে হয়। Thank you very much, sir. Now I am inviting Professor S.N. Bhattacharya, President, Museum Association of West Bengal. Sir, please. Sir, unmute করুন, sir. Please unmute yourself, sir. Sir, Professor Bhattacharya, please unmute yourself, sir. হ্যাঁ স্যার, চলে যাচ্ছে।
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clearly.
Good morning to all of you. I want to offer my sincere thanks and gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu, and Mr. Sudeep Babu as IAS officer and director of the State Archaeology and Museums, and also Professor Sumohan, and finally Professor Topon De, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Commerce. Today is a very important day because we are celebrating 75 years of our independence, and that too we are also trying to look back the contribution, their attribution of the Adivasis. And we titled the seminar as World of the Adivasis. Yes, they have their own world, which is the world of the starvation, which is the world of poor health, which is the world of disease, lack of proper household, proper shelter, and whatnot. But they have positive contribution in our freedom movement, and there are many things which they have done during our freedom movement. But during the last 75 years, yes, government has done a lot, both the state government and the government of India, but I'm afraid how much the Adivasis were benefited. They are inducted in the political system, they are inducted in the social system, various social systems, they are given some privileges also in the society, but ultimately, for many reasons, their achievement is not that good. Still there is a duck. They are in the education system, they are in the lagging behind, and they are not doing well. And in other modern systems, modern life, they are also lagging behind. We are seriously think about them and their welfare. We know there are several tribes and there are several types of Adivasis. They have their own pattern of life and they have their own pattern of food habit. They have their own pattern of shelter, clothing, hunting, etc. But we have to relook again the history of the Adivasis and how we could best do for them in the present context. I think this seminar, this international webinar will suggest many things for us, which may contribute to the development, overall development of the Adivasi people at large, not only in India but also throughout the world. Because it is not confined in India but also throughout the world. They are suffering long time for their poverty, for their modern. They are away from the modern system of life. So all these things are to be dealt with properly and to be. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible. You are clearly audible, sir.
So yes, there are some museums, but those museums are not to that of the elitist museum of the country. All the elitist museums are like science and technology museums, the Indian museums, the Asiatic Society museums, the national museums and other museums. But we must have a national museum of Adivasis to that they are suffering from identity crisis. That identity crisis may be overcome if we can establish a national museum. It is a very good and very important area that the Vidyasagar University has started a Adivasi museum, and their collection is very rich. And those things, if properly preserved, including the intellectual properties of the museum, I think it will be a landmark museum, and other universities and colleges will definitely follow all these things. So with these words, I want to conclude my lecture in a brief, because I have another meeting. So I again thank you all the participants and all the dignitaries present here, including the Vice Chancellor and the Dean and the Director of the Adivasi Museum and Mr. Director of the Archaeological Museums. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, may I take the privilege to invite the chair, Professor Tapon Kumar De, Department of Philosophy, Vidyasagar University, and Dean, Faculty of Arts and Commerce, to deliver his address as the chair of this inaugural session.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, Suman. Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu, Director, Adivasi Studies Center, Vidyasagar University, Chief Guest, Mr. Sudeep Ghosh, IAS, Director of State Archaeology and Museum, Government of West Bengal, Guest of Honor, Professor S.N. Bhattacharya, President, Museum Association of West Bengal, Registrar Dr. J.K. Nondi, and other research persons, students, scholars who are here. Today, the national webinar organized by the Adivasi Studies Center of Vidyasagar University. There is many worlds of the Adivasis, pre and post-independence realities. I think the inaugural speech of our Honorable Vice Chancellor and the speech of the Chief Guest and Guest of Honor have already seen the root of the seminar, the song of the seminar, which will be delivered and will be cultured by the participants throughout the day. We all know that Adivasi population is the largest population in the world as Adivasi in India. Yet the exploitation is there, and we, the civilized people, take each and every opportunity to exploit them, to devise them. And at present, a process is being followed by some scholars and researchers that is called Sanskritization. That is, they want to bring the Adivasi communities into the mainstream. But I think the richest culture of the Adivasis should be preserved as it is, and we have no right to disturb them with our chauvinistic attitude related to culture. I think instead of Sanskritization of Adivasis culture, naturalization of our so-called civilized culture is necessary, more necessary for the sake of the world, for the sake of the nature, as well as for the preservation of the Adivasis culture. With these few words and with thanks to all the participants and honorable Vice Chancellor and also guest of honor, Chief Guest, I conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, with permission from the chair, may I request the organizing secretary of today's international webinar, Dr. Nirmal Kumar Mahato, to offer the vote of thanks.
I have the honor to acknowledge dignitaries, guests, speakers, officials of our university, and students, all who have made important contribution for conducting this webinar on the occasion of 75 years of India's independence. First of all, I express my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shivaji Pratim Boshu, who has given permission and his presence made this seminar successful. I am also grateful to Sri Sudip Ghosh, IAS, Director of State Archaeology and Museum, Government of West Bengal, for his presence as chief guest. I also express heartfelt thanks to Professor Tapan Kumar De, Dean, Faculty Council of Arts and Commerce, Vidyasagar University. I also grateful to Director Computer Science and staff members Vidyasagar University for their technical help. It is my privilege to express my gratitude to Professor Sachindranath Bhattacharya, former professor of Museology, University of Calcutta and President of West Bengal Museum Association, who is gracing this occasion as guest of honor. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the invited speakers, Professor Vinita Damodaran, Director, Center for World Environmental History, University of Sussex. She is also a noted historian on Adivasi studies and environmental history. Professor Abu Daim, Department of Bengali, Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh. He is also very well known in Adivasi studies. And our other invited speakers, Professor Indranil Acharya, Professor, Department of English, Vidyasagar University, Monatam Samacharan Hemram, he is also poet, and HOD, Department of Santali, Vidyasagar University. I also thankful to Professor Deepak Kumar Midda and Dr. Shomita Sarkar, Chair and Co-Chair for the first academic session of the webinar. Professor Indranil Acharya and Dr. Ratan Hemram, who will chair and co-chair the second academic session. I express my thanks to the galaxy of audience, my esteemed colleagues, faculties and research scholars, and my dear students, who are actually the true strength of our all efforts. So I express a grateful thanks also to our respected registrar, finance officer, and other officers of our university who has given administrative help for conducting this webinar. Lastly, I express my gratitude to our convener, Professor Sumohan Bandyopadhyay, Director and convener of this webinar, whose tireless effort make this webinar a grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nirmal Kumar Mahato. Now, with the permission of the chair, this academic session will be closed. Inaugural session will be closed. But before leaving, sir, should we conclude? But before concluding, we would like to make an announcement for the first academic session that will start at 1 p.m. With the invited lectures by Professor Indranil Acharya and Shyam Charan Hembro. And this session will be chaired by Professor Deepak Kumar Midda and co-chaired by Dr. Shomita Sarkar. Sir,
Thank you.
should we conclude this session with your kind permission?
Sure.
Sir, then please announce this inaugural session.
So it is the concluding time of the inaugural session. All are present here. I'm thankful to all of you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. We shall resume at 1 p.m. Thank you very much. Please join us at 1 p.m.